Okay, so are we back on the... All right, so I think we're back. I hope that some of you stuck around for this. Hopefully, let me know in the chat. Yeah, let me know in the chat if we're good and the audio's here. I guess I should back up a little bit and reintroduce this morning's guest. So I am joined by, I guess, oh, okay, great. It looks like we're back. Thank you for sticking through this. I'm sorry about the audio problems. Sleepy Josh has had to kill like a 6-hour project in order to make this happen. So send him weed. I guess you couldn't hear any of this. So I am joined this morning by Eric Jackman, who is co-host of Jackman Radio. He worked for the Gabbard 2020 campaign. He's a comedian and a wonderful human being. And Eric, how are you?
Hey man, thanks so much for having me. I'm great. I'm happy to be back here with you and doing your show. We're locked down here in New Hampshire and sticking to the hunker in place order until things settle down and numbers go down. But other than that, doing very well, man. Very well.
So is it a thing where they're waiting for the numbers to go down, or they're waiting for us to completely give up every last shred of our civil liberties, and then they're going to be like, oh, and by the way, we're rolling out automation?
It could be a combination of all those things, man. I mean, I was telling Josh before. My aunt and uncle actually got the virus, and they're in their 60s. They live in Massachusetts, so they're coming through the other side of it. But obviously, it's very serious thing, and I'd feel terrible if I was out and I unknowingly had it and spread it to someone. So I would just like to know that we've stabilized and less people are getting it, and getting numbers from hospitals and cases and confirmation of people who actually died from it, that those numbers are leveling out. But of course, man, we have to keep our eye on the ball with what's happening with civil liberties, with how far they want to push, going completely cashless, even getting rid of credit cards, and there's so many doors that this thing is opening up that can really allow further government intrusion into our everyday lives, and the trace tracking and all that stuff. So yeah, man, I think it's going to be a combination of all that. They're obviously the powers that be, they never let a something like this go to waste without trying to push the envelope as far as they can in the name of safety and security and policy and health and everything. So
yeah, that's a Machiavelli quote originally, I believe, that's been picked up and ran with by intelligence communities throughout history. Never let a good crisis go to waste. What
exactly.
do you think Alex Jones would have to say about this exact situation?
Well, look, Steve, obviously this thing is concocted by the Soros globalists and the deep state, working with their counterparts in China. They got the lab over there in China where they got the Chi-Coms and animal-human hybrids. We're talking about reindeer and human beings being mixed together in wet markets with bats flying everywhere. And the virus came out of one of those things' butts and got in the wet market, and someone coughed on someone, then they sneezed on them, and then Soros weaponized it and brought it over here in an aerosol form and dropped it in New York City. Infowars.com. But I would say, well, Jones, Jones is kind of saying the same thing. He's putting his Alex Jones spin on it, but he went on London Real there with Brian Rose and talked about kind of the same thing. Government and power structures are going to try and push the envelope as far as they can, and hope that there'll be minimal pushback from the people, from activists. I mean, like I saw what happened in Michigan, and I understand the point they were making and what they were doing, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of people who went out and did that, they're going to either spread the virus or get it themselves. So it's like a catch-22 type thing. But it's just so obvious that this is right out of the globalist playbook. Huxley, Brave New World, 1984. Stay asleep. 2 + 2 = 5. Infowars.com.
what is absolutely nuts about that is that it really is, though. I mean, like, we know from a handful of different competent researchers that there have been simulated exercises going back to
Hmm.
2001
Oh
that
yeah.
all map out a post-pandemic police state and the transition to that. And lo and behold, almost every suggested end game from all forms of those simulated exercises is being rolled out right now. And people are acting like the government's response isn't enough, or it's incompetent, or they weren't prepared and they got caught off by surprise. There were 5 separate simulated exercises in 2019 alone, 4 of which were held by the United States government, called Crimson Contagion.
Yeah, absolutely. Whitney Webb, I'm sure you read that, just wrote about that for Last American Vagabond.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
no,
she got she
I had her on to come talk
oh
to us about it.
Whit, Whitney Webb is thank God for her, man. But yeah, she looked into all that, and then my brother was talking about anthrax and how that most likely came out of Fort Detrick there in Maryland, and same thing can go with the Wuhan here. I mean, who knows where the thing originated? It probably originated in one of those labs somewhere and got over to China. I mean, who really knows behind the scenes what the real story is? But the reality
And
is,
that's the problem, is that you and I are probably never going to find out. All we can do is look at what's taken place, look at the research that's already been done about it. If we can, go to the documents and form our own conclusions. But we're never going to get it straight from our government or from our legacy media.
no, absolutely not. I mean, government legacy media is one and the same. That's been proven time and time again. But say what you will about the origin of it, and what, like you said, what we can do is we can document and keep our eyes on the ball with the response and shift in policies, shift in behaviors, attitudes. I mean, I read a great piece about the just think about the unbelievable marketing campaign that's going to come in the wake of this thing for return to life, as it once was. We're gonna have just the levels of weaponization of emotions in media and advertising is going to be something like we've never. It's going to be like after 9/11. It will be proud, go out, go shopping, spend money, be patriotic. The terrorists win when we don't resume our way of life, and it's going to be the same with this thing, man. And there's going to be Madison Avenue advertising campaigns that would make Bernays blush. Fucking, he would blush at the level of psychological operating and spin and it just shows you that fear is a very powerful weapon, man, of the elite and of our media and our governments. And you're looking at 320 million people in a country in America that essentially was ground to a halt, like a complete stop. And unemployment claims going up, I think, over 15 or 20 million at this point.
Yeah.
And it's been unbelievable to watch, man. I can't even believe it's happening. It's surreal. And like you said, they had drills for this kind of thing and prepped for it. And media, the movie Their Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman and series on CNN called Pandemic. I mean, it's all out there. It's all out there to be injected into the subconscious of the American psyche, and it's really is playing out like a Hollywood movie.
So I saw you had tweeted out about Out of the Shadows,
Mm.
the doc that came out, I guess either at the beginning of last week, I think.
Yep.
And I hadn't watched it yet, so I decided to watch it this morning because I thought it might be interesting to talk about it for a little bit. What was your overall impression of that doc? And if guys in the chat, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch. It's worth the hour or so. It really is.
It's 100% worth watching. And Jason Burmis put out like a great 5 to 7 minute review of the movie, and I'm 100% agreement with Burmis about what he said. And basically, my takeaway is that the people who made the movie drew on a lot of research that Dave McGowan had done about Laurel Canyon and mind control and MK Ultra for that part of it. McGowan wrote the book Strange Scenes in Laurel Canyon, which I read, which is all about defense intelligence and military intelligence having connections to all the big acts that sprung up in the 60s from Laurel Canyon, like the Grateful Dead and all the acid that was going around, the drug scene, the hippie culture, essentially showing that the counterculture was pretty much engineered, at worst, and at best was manipulated and used by those entities and powers to neuter real dissent and real activism and real threats that could come up from the young hippie generation of being against war, being against totalitarian policies and that sort of thing. So I thought that aspect of it was awesome. The MK Ultra stuff was great. The aspect about the two stuntmen who came out and spoke out, which I thought was very refreshing, and that there's a lot more people like that in Hollywood that want to tell their story of things they've seen, they've experienced, connections between government and Hollywood. They talked about essentially how big budget movies like Zero Dark 30 and American Sniper and, just straight up pro-war global style propaganda is one and the same with the information arm of the Central Intelligence Agency. If they want a certain narrative put out there about an event or an operation or the war on terror or anything, 9/11, they get with like someone like Catherine Bigelow, and they get with these big Hollywood people, and they get someone on the set who's from the CIA or one of the agencies, and they make sure a script is followed, and they make sure that the story that is put out there aligns with what the government and the official narratives want to be out in the public. And then we eat it up, and then it becomes Chris Kyle's a fucking hero. The Bin Laden raid went down exactly like they said in the movie. And that then becomes our memory of it and how we view the event. When in reality, I mean, well, it's totally different than what we see in the movie. So it was great to see all that covered. Liz Crokin, she's like part of the Q crowd, so that's kind of a critique I have of it, leaning too heavily on her and what she's saying. A lot of it was interesting, but when you start going into the Q waters, that's where you're going to lose a lot of people, and that's where people who want to debunk this stuff and say none of it's real, elite pedophilia doesn't exist, they don't traffic children, Hollywood, the intelligence agencies in DC aren't all connected in cahoots, that's just all conspiracy theory. They're going to be able to do that when they can point to fanatical, crazy people who are all part of the Q crowd. So I could have done without that little bit of Q influence. But overall, the information about MK Ultra, about intelligence, working with Walt Disney and setting up Disney and helping purchase the land where it was created. I mean, all of that. I didn't know a lot of that, and all that's all documented stuff, and that's a really good place for a lot of people to look at when they're starting their research into this stuff. So
yeah, no, that was a new one to me too. I knew that Disney had plenty of connections with the OSS and with the United States government in terms of the propaganda films that they put out, the propaganda cartoons. But I did not realize that the fucking Swampy Orange Grove came to be the happiest place on earth through CIA seed money.
Yeah.
That was fucking fascinating.
That's out there, man. And yeah, I mean, they go into Paperclip. I mean, a lot of people know about Operation Paperclip, but when you actually like think about what it actually was and peel it back for what it was, I mean, you had Nazis running our essentially
Nazi draft.
Yeah.
It wasn't just us. It was the UK. It was other France. It was other countries. Everybody wanted some Nazi scientists, and we got more of them because we had more to offer them. But it was straight out the fucking Nazi draft.
And for people who haven't dug too deep into this, that's a shocking thing to think about when you trust everything the government said to you and your knowledge of that era and that period of time, and then you're told, well, actually, like our rocket program and space program, it was the Nazis,
Are you familiar with Tom Lehrer? He was
like Learjet?
No, Lehrer, Lehrer.
I'm not sure.
He was a math professor, and his side gig was writing silly songs and going and performing them. And a lot of his songs ended up being up on like kids TV. He did songs for the Animaniacs. He did songs for the Electric Company. One of his songs is called Werner von Braun, and it is absolutely hysterical because he's got lines in it like call him a Nazi, he won't even frown, Nazi schmazi, says Werner von Braun. Don't say that he's hypocritical, say rather that he's apolitical. And shit like that. And the very last line of the song is, "Und I'm learning Chinese," says Werner von Braun. But here's a guy who came out of MIT and Harvard, or Harvard first, then MIT, and was basically like through song trying to tell people about Operation Paperclip in a very humorous and lighthearted way.
Right.
And whether or not his audience caught on to it, I can't say with any certainty, but the song has been out since like the 50s. It just, in a subtle way, trying to let people know, yeah, as a matter of fact, we did have a Nazi draft.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I mean, a lot of their occult practices permeated its way into like our military and people in our military. I mean, they talked about General Michael Aquino, the Church of Satan, that Satanist dude with the scary eyebrows. I mean, people got to look into this stuff. I mean, this shit is like you couldn't believe it until you actually saw it and heard from him. Sean Stone was interviewing him and asking him about it. So covering all that stuff was great to see all of that information that a lot of us know about out there in the ether, kind of synthesized and narrowed and put into a digestible 80-minute documentary, which needed to happen. So like overall, man, I definitely give it like an 8 out of 10. And then they did cover the Pizzagate stuff in a pretty good way, because when you look at like the Podesta brothers art collection and the emails in the coded language is actually explained to you, and then you're shown the declassified FBI documents for the symbols of pedophiles like the boy love swirl and that sort of stuff. And then they start showing you the bands that played at Comet Ping Pong, and that one of their music videos had the Boy Love Swirl in it. The Best of Pizza logo sign had it. And then you look at these people's Instagram pages like, look, yeah, I'm a comedian. I do comedy. Sometimes I tell edgy and gross jokes. But, dude, that's beyond the point of joking. You don't joke about shit like that, in that manner without there being smoke there where there's fire. So,
what that does is it culturally conditions people and desensitizes them to that kind of stuff. So that when you hear about it, and you hear about it like when they had to cover Pizzagate, when mainstream media was forced to cover Pizzagate, the narrative that they spun was one of absolute batshittery that nobody would ever fucking believe. And at the time, Sam Tripoli, a friend of the show, was screaming, this isn't about Pizzagate. Pizzagate isn't real. They're using Pizzagate to obfuscate from Pedogate, which was an unintentional rhyme. I did not mean to do that.
It was a red herring that, oh, you think the Clintons run a trafficking ring out of the basement of a pizza shop. That's the meme. The mainstream media turned it into a meme, weaponized it, and then made that stick. And then whatever the story was behind the fucking nut bar who went and shot the place up, whether he was who knows what the real story is behind that. But that was the sleight of hand misdirection that happened, because people who were really digging into the emails, connecting who the emails were to and from, like the Sadler family, that billionaire with the Podestas, Marina Abramovich with Spirit Cooking. I mean, you start going, you go down that path and you look into the players involved. It's kind of all laid out there in front of you. And then the names of the artists of the art hanging in Tony Podesta's house. It's fucking sick, man. These people are sick and twisted. And
then there's the whole Nexium cult and the Abramovich family that is still tied in with all of that as well.
Oh, the Bronfmans.
Bronfman, that's right. Yep. And fucking Sam Bronfman, if you read Whitney Webb's series or you watched this show last year when she was dropping it, you learned all about Sam Bronfman. I actually had the fortune of being the first show to interview Whitney about that series.
Oh, Man,
Yeah.
the work that Whitney Webb did and the connections that she was able to see and then point out. I mean, it's Pizzagate. You have to have a historical lens and context. I mean, you have to know about the Franklin scandal out of Nebraska. You have to know about that. Boys Town, that ring being run all over the country. And then it helps to know about some of the Hollywood stuff. Cases like Heather O'Rourke. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She was the blonde girl in Poltergeist, where her death. I mean, if you have done some research and looked into that, essentially she was gang raped and murdered by a bunch of people in a set there in Hollywood on a TV show that she was on, and that was covered up and made to look like something else. So when you understand that kind of stuff, and then you flash forward to the 2016 election and the WikiLeaks and the emails, it all makes sense. And then, of course, the Bronfmans being part of blackmail rings going back to the 40s and 50s or even before that. It's the MO of the elite and intelligence agencies and the powerful. It's how they maintain power. It's how they have their grip on people, and it's how they're able to puppeteer captains of industry, the media, Hollywood, politicians, diplomats from other countries. It's the way the game works, man, and it's been exposed. Like, it's been laid bare, and it's there for anyone who has the courage to look at it and be honest about it. That is actually real.
Which makes the timing of lockdown a little bit suspicious, because we really were getting to a point where a lot of the general public was starting to put all these pieces together on their own. We had 48 countries that were engaged in massive civil disobedience. We had the yellow vests in France that were going on for, I think, 62 weeks before they got, before France got put on lockdown. And we were almost at a boiling point here, even with all of our comforts and all of our propagandizing and all of our cultural conditioning, to where people were starting to reclaim the energy that we had when we had a genuine anti-war movement during the Bush years, when we had Occupy. We're almost 10 years removed from Occupy. And Commander X, one of the Anons who got snagged up in Anonymous's little fucking NSA trap, and who had to go hide out until he received asylum in Mexico. He was just on the Free Assange Vigil yesterday, but a couple of months back, he was like, look, man, if I have any advice to anyone, it's sell everything you own and go occupy an embassy, or go occupy Belmarsh prison, or go occupy Washington, D.C., and don't fucking leave until they let Julian Assange out. We were like, hell, fuck yeah, let's do that.
Yep.
And really, I mean, we were in Washington, D.C. for the first week of Julian Assange's extradition hearing. We were making a lot of plans for what we were going to do when we came back in May and June for the second round of his extradition hearing. As we're getting on the plane, they're starting to issue travel bans to come home. And now we're obviously not going to be traveling to Washington, D.C. at the end of May.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's our fault. I'm just saying that that's one of those casualties of whatever the opposite of circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, certainly, there's a lot of good things that are happening for the power establishment with the virus. They're able to consolidate a lot of their power and stifle protest and stifle a lot of activism. That might have had some wind in its sails, obviously, with yellow vest movements and people, essentially taking to the streets and just demanding better conditions, demanding better pay, a better quality of life. So this virus comes along and it shuts everything down. I mean, absolutely, the corporatocracy is going to take advantage of that and use it to their benefit. So there's no doubt about that, man. But we're keeping it going here digitally. We're keeping it going online, and it's not going to stop us from speaking up. They haven't cut the internet, so that's good. But some people.
How does Pints and Politics work on lockdown? By the way, guys, Eric has a fantastic show called Pints and Politics, and he's interviewed man, just heavy hitters in the U.S. political scene. You should go check that out if you haven't.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we are we're in talks with some people to do kind of like what you and I are doing right now, to do a Skype or a Zoom interview video chat. So we're talking to a few potential guests, and my producer who lives in Connecticut, he's thinking about coming up, and bringing all his camera equipment and trying to set up like a really good high quality interview segment where we can knock out a few interviews and keep it going. But yeah, with the election over, I mean, obviously a lot of those people aren't traveling through New Hampshire right now, but we got a lot of feelers out there for potential interviews, and we're always doing research and thinking about cool guests we'd like to have on. But yeah, we had on some cool people. We had Andrew Yang on and Marianne Williamson, and obviously Tulsi came on. We had Admiral Joe Sestak, who ran for president. He's an interesting guy. I really enjoyed my time with him. He's a cool guy. And then we had the author Stephen Kinzer, who teaches at Brown University. And I don't know if you know Kinzer's work, but he's really, anti-regime change and a very pro-peace kind of guy. And, he writes for the Boston Globe. So he's got a pretty big platform. And my brother sat down with him for an hour over a beer. And his latest book deals with kind of the tie into MK Ultra. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who ran MK Ultra, and who was the main guy. And if anyone's watched Wormwood on Netflix, Frank Olson there, who fucking they pushed out of the window there at the hotel in New York City. Gottlieb is all over that. So Stephen Kinzer has done incredible research into MK Ultra and just Sidney Gottlieb's life, what made him tick, who he was connected to. And I mean, the guy was like a shadow man. He was
Let's stay on this for a minute, because I think when you were on Free Assange, we got off on like a Laurel tangent, MK Ultra tangent.
Sure.
Fuck, I need to have this guy on the show.
Well, yeah, I mean, Sidney Gottlieb was like essentially everywhere but nowhere, and that thing was so compartmentalized, and no one knew what the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. And Frank Olson was a chemist and biochemist and engineer type dude, and his conscience just got the better of him. And I think he was wanting to blow the whistle or go public about it or just walk away from the life. He would say, I just want to disappear and I want my family to be safe and I don't want to be involved with this anymore. And then he goes out the window of a high-rise hotel in New York City. But another great thing with the coming out about the MK Ultra thing is Joe Rogan had an author named Tom O'Neill on his podcast recently, who wrote a book. I think I have it here somewhere. I bought the book. My brother bought the book over a year ago, and actually we were talking to the author to have him on our show. It never ended up happening, but I was so glad to see Rogan had him on, and they just spoke for like over 3 hours. And O'Neill spent 20 years researching the Charles Manson case and the Tate LaBianca murders out in California, and found so many strange connections to intelligence and MK Ultra type people who were engineering and monitoring and moving the chess pieces of the hippie counterculture movement out in California in the 60s. And basically it just points to Charles Manson being a I don't know if you want to call him unwitting or what you want to call him, but I mean, he was going to this facility, and yeah, here's the book right here. Grab me another sud too. So here's the book, Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and Secret History of the 60s. So it's Tom O'Neill. So yeah, definitely a good book. But yeah, essentially it looks like there's just an MK Ultra apparatus of intelligence around Manson and kind of an unseen hand that was driving things.
I'm gonna have to check that book out. I get buried in what I do with the show here, and we've done Free Assange we're going into our 42nd straight week. So I don't get much time to,
right.
I don't know, watch a lot of content or do a lot of reading. And then when I do read at night, I want to be able to like dump my fucking brain out. and not have
Yeah.
to, have my head spun. All of a sudden it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm fucking drinking coffee like I can't stop reading.
Oh God, I know. I know. Well, there's just so much. We've never had more access to information than we do at this very moment, man. And for people who are think deeply about this, obviously, like you do, and my brother and I do, um, we go deep into it. We go hard in the paint, man. But yeah,
Well, and I
Rogan.
was hesitant to go into the whole like Laurel Canyon and co-opting or manipulation of or invention of the counterculture thing because I spent several formative years in Grateful Dead parking lots selling mushrooms and acid and grilled cheese sandwiches and bootleg t-shirts and fucking eventually just packs of fresh socks. Um,
Wow.
dude, if you go to a fucking a concert where people have been on the road,
Right.
where you're going city to city to city, where you got a 2-day break and then you got to be halfway across the country in those 2 days, and you're city, 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 city. If you go there and you have fresh socks, that's almost like having a nitrous tank. Like the line of people just sort of forms up. The homeboy's like, dude, my girl will blow you. Just give me the socks. It's like, but come on, like, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
so
uh,
you lived that life then. So you
yeah,
were deeply tied. You were into that scene pretty deeply.
yeah.
And
I
I
was
don't want
at
to.
one point in my life. I had a belt buckle that only a handful of people earned.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? And it's not to take away from the actual music itself, because believe me, man, like the Beach Boys are one of my favorite bands of all time. I grew up on them. My father lived in Ventura, California from 1965 to 68. So he was out there as a teenager when the Beach Boys were everything. He was surfing, and he played the Beach Boys for me when I was a kid. So I was raised on a lot of this music. So it's not to take away from the actual art itself and the brilliance of a lot of this music, but what people need to understand is that there were sinister forces who were looking, well, not looking, who were guiding it in a lot of ways by getting it media exposure, by saturating certain areas with LSD and drugs. I mean, you probably at times had to ask yourself, or some people maybe they didn't ask themselves, how the hell did 60,000 tabs of acid end up at a Grateful Dead concert? Where the fuck did it come from? You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Who?
It wasn't just Owsley in the upstairs room at 710.
Right, right. There was a lot more going on behind the scenes. So I'll read a little bit of the genesis here of David McGowan's book, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Laurel Canyon Covert Ops, and the dark heart of the hippie scene. It says the very strange but nevertheless true story of the dark underbelly of 1960s hippie utopia. Laurel Canyon in the 60s and early 70s was a magical place where a dizzying array of musical artists congregated to create much of the music that provided the soundtrack to those turbulent times. Members of bands like the Byrds, the Doors, Buffalo Springfield, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, the Turtles, the Eagles, Flying Burrito Brothers, Frank Zappa, Mothers of Invention, Three Dog Night, along with singer-songwriters such as Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, James Taylor, and Carole King, lived together and jammed together in the bucolic community nestled in the Hollywood Hills. But there was a dark side to that scene as well, and many didn't make it out alive, and many of those deaths remain shrouded in mystery to this day. Far more integrated into the scene than most would like to admit was a guy by the name of Charles Manson, along with his murderous entourage. Also floating about the periphery were various political operatives, up and coming politicians, and intelligence personnel, the same sort of people who gave birth to many of the rock stars populating the canyon. And all the canyon's colorful characters, rock stars, hippies, murderers, and politicos, happily coexisted alongside a covert military installation, which was Lookout Mountain, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Yeah, yeah. And,
And
and guys, if you're unaware of Lookout Mountain, go ahead and get on DuckDuckGo after the show today and look that up. Look up
yeah,
Lookout. Yeah.
Jared Leto owned the place recently.
Yeah.
And and Lookout Mountain is where they produced. I mean, this Lookout Mountain was a massive like film studio. They had everything there, and this is where the testing tapes of our nuclear programs going back to the 40s and 50s. If you look at the reels, and it says produced by U.S. government at Lookout Mountain. read on the tapes of nuclear testing happening on our soldiers and crazy shit like that. So what the hell is this giant nuclear installation doing in the heart of Laurel Canyon, kind of overlooking everything? So if you start there in your journey and your research and you're interested in this stuff, you'll find out a lot of interesting thing. And a lot of these rock stars and rock idols where the children of huge military brass, intelligence operators. The famous one is Jim Morrison. His father was Admiral Morrison, who was connected to the Gulf of
The
Tonkin.
Gulf of Tonkin. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
at that point, or in that era, that was the false flag.
right, right. It's true, man. So
No, and yeah, Morrison was basically like, I don't want to say he was the first homegrown manufactured rock god, because I think that was Elvis, but he was definitely, for that time and for that purpose, Morrison was a manufactured creation.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these musicians had never even played music before, and then all of a sudden they're on the strip and they got all this great gear and they got promo, they got teams building them up, they're booking them gigs at big venues. It's like anyone who's in a band or is a working musician knows that you don't just snap your fingers. There's got to be some powerful people who can pull some levers and move some pieces on a chessboard to make that kind of stuff happen. So the
No, I've been a working musician before. I was doing like 5 nights a week in Denver and Boulder, Colorado. Still had to have a day job.
Of course, of course. But if you maybe had a friend in the CIA or military intelligence who wanted to get something out there, maybe they'll help you and turn you into a star. So
In that Out of the Shadows film, they touch on the career arc of Katy Perry, and I mean, it's tragic in and of itself, but it's such a good example of agenda driven music, and I think, and that's the reason that we get mock films. They mentioned Zoolander, but Josie and the Pussycats is a fucking fantastic one, because they're actually showing you that, look, we can take a band off the street and make them famous and use them as the vehicles for our agenda.
That's right. That's right. I mean, Katy Perry started out as a Christian singer, which a lot of people have no idea about or don't know about. And then now she's a friggin' Illuminati satanic princess. You know, she's an MK Ultra beta bunny. You know, just she has the people behind her. It's just this stuff too. I mean, you look into a lot of it. There's money laundering, there's drug trafficking, there's human trafficking, there's child porn. It's all that kind of stuff, and activity springs up around all this stuff. So at the basis of a lot of famous people or famous scenes is really dark and nasty stuff. So, I think McGowan's work into it is great, and certainly a guy named Jay Dyer. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
Jay Dyer does a lot of great research, and I'm sure the filmmakers used a lot of what he researched about MK Ultra, the music industry, the film industry, being connected to dark forces and intelligence and all that. So it's all kind of there. You just got to be willing to look at it and kind of have an open mind about it, and then you got to be able to admit to yourself that my whole life I've literally been programmed my whole life to believe something, or to view these people and entities as something good, as a good positive influence that I should listen to, that I should follow. I mean, they make the point, it's called programming for a reason. You are literally being programmed by that box in your living room.
I can't tell you how many people have straight the fuck up laughed in my face when I have told them that, like, but no, I'm not telling you. It's not me telling you.
Right.
The announcer tells you. The program director
of programming. Your manipulator of propaganda has a message for you.
I'm not making this shit up. I'm just drawing your attention to it. I'm not the bad guy for that, or I shouldn't be the bad guy for that.
No.
But I look at what they're doing to fucking Julian Assange. They're making him the devil for being the messenger.
Yeah,
And
he's the courier of
always
truth.
the messenger.
Courier of truth, man. Did you watch Corey Feldman's documentary?
I watched about 15 minutes of it, and I couldn't watch anymore.
Yeah. Do you not trust Corey Feldman?
No,
Or where?
I trust Corey Feldman. I wasn't in the headspace to
Mm,
dive into it, and I haven't gone back to it yet.
yeah,
I knew
I don't
what
blame
I
you.
was going to hear was going to fucking freak me out and make me sad. And
Sure.
that particular day that he happened to drop it, like I was going through some shit, and I was like, no, I can't.
Not today. Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah,
totally
I'm gonna have
understandable.
to revisit it because I do believe Corey Feldman.
I
I
do too.
do,
He's telling the truth.
I think he might be trying to sensationalize a little bit, but he comes out of Hollywood and he's trying to sell a product,
Hmm.
like,
Sure.
and his
Well,
product may be the truth, but you've got to be able to package it flashy enough to drag people into it.
yeah, you have to get attention for it, and unfortunately, there has to be. There doesn't have to be, but there is sensationalism. But I mean, anyone who paid attention and who had looked deeply into Corey Feldman and Corey Haim knew that he was going to name Charlie Sheen as the guy that raped Corey Haim on the set of Lucas in the '80s. That was out there. I mean, that was like an open secret, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
feel bad about making fun of Corey Haim now, but I did make fun of Corey Haim, and the reason I made fun of Corey Haim is because I did Santa Cruz, California, is of course where they filmed the Lost Boys,
hmm
and every few years they will have a public viewing of the Lost Boys on a giant inflatable screen on the beach. And there was one, I think it was the 30th anniversary. My friend and I, Ben Unger, we got our families together and we grabbed his plastic lawn furniture and threw it into a truck, and we drove down in two vehicles and we dragged a plastic table and chairs out onto the beach, dug a big hole that the kids could play in, and we sat there and we played dominoes, like while all of this was going on and getting set up. And Corey Haim's band played terribly, just terribly. And they opened and closed with the theme from the Lost Boys, like "Thou shalt not," yeah, that
yeah,
song twice. And apparently they had a guitarist with them that had at one point played for Pink Floyd, so they played like a couple of Pink Floyd covers, and it was just awful. And Haim was like drug bloated.
oh yeah,
And he was really just a couple of blocks away from like really stepped on but really affordable heroin and a bunch of pills.
mm.
So I'm sure he was fucking hired in giraffe pussy when he was on the stage. But
Yeah.
but so we made fun of him, and now I feel
Yeah.
bad about that.
Well, I mean, you could make fun of shitty music, that's okay. um, wow. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Corey Haim and Corey Feldman are products of that whole system, man. The child abuse of Hollywood. It's all there, and Feldman had that young kid who was part of the Disney system in the documentary, and there's so many others that they want to tell their stories and they want their story to come out. I mean, one of them is Amanda Bynes for Nickelodeon, and the case of Dan Schneider, and it's pretty much out there that Dan Schneider, who was a huge producer for Nickelodeon, produced some of the biggest shows on there. Um, The Sweet Life with Zach and Cody, The Amanda Show, Ariana Grande, like made them all stars. That he was just, a pedophile to the nth, and he actually had impregnated Britney Spears' sister, Jamie Lynn Spears, and that's who the real father of her baby was when she was like a young teenager. I don't know how old she was exactly when she had the baby. And then, it's Amanda Bynes has pretty much alluded to Schneider being her abuser and her wanting to come out and talk about that. So I hope that like documentaries like Out of the Shadows, and Corey Feldman's documentary, um, stuff about MK Ultra. I hope more people become more aware of it and can connect it to these other avenues to the web. It runs really deep, man. In the web, it's a deep web. So
Well, and here's the thing: we after the church commission, where it was revealed to the public that MK Ultra existed and Operation Paperclip was a thing. After that happened, they tried to make pretend like, and we shut it down.
right.
And
Right.
even NPR, the Washington Post, will run articles alluding to the fact that these programs existed, but they'll say, ran through the 60s or ended in the early 70s, like a successful program that had yielded results that were then implemented onto society is just going to shut down and not change names. Like, that's fucking ridiculous to me.
No,
There was a Hollywood producer, Michelin or Milchin, I think. One of those two. Milchin, I think, is his name.
Arnon Milchan.
Yeah. Who when he died, or very close to before his death, like, it was revealed that not only was he an Israeli billionaire, but he was also Mossad.
Yeah, actually, I don't think he's dead, man. I think he's still
Is
alive.
he not dead? I thought he passed away.
Arnon Milchan, born in 1944, is an Israeli billionaire, businessman, and film producer. Oh yeah, and he produced some of the biggest. He produced JFK, Heat, Fight Club, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, L.A. Confidential. Yeah, he was Arnon Milchan was a Mossad arms dealer, basically.
Yeah. And like, this is when it's common knowledge like this. Do you think that it just gets brushed off by the public, or does it will it? I do believe it's starting to sink in, but now we're being fed, pandemic porn 20.
I think what it is the American psyche and consciousness. This is who in the events. Oh, it was his internet. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, we're back up.
Well, cool, because there was someone in the chat had mentioned when we were in the middle of a conversation about the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
Someone in the chat had brought up hip hop, and I wanted to kind of go into that a little bit, because there is a very clear and very direct agenda that takes place in hip hop.
Yeah, are you familiar with Adam Green of No More News?
Yeah, I've watched some of that. Yeah.
Adam Green of No More News has an incredible maybe it's a 30, 45-minute one of his episodes about hip hop, the rap industry, and Zionism and those forces really being behind it, and kind of puppeteering the whole thing and creating the beefs and pouring gasoline on Bloods versus Crips and engineering and manufacturing a lot of that shit. So is that kind of the path you're thinking about, or what do you know about the hip hop scene?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different things, and one is the influence that fake studio gangsters had on creating a culture of real, actual gangsters.
Mm-hmm.
The timing of it coincides with the passing of the 1994 Crime Act, which completely militarized the police force, expanded it dramatically, ramped up the war on drugs. This is
Yes.
when a helicopter worth of cocaine would get you the same charge as a crack rock. Um, and there was a direct agenda being pushed through the hip hop community. This is who you are, and this is how you're supposed to live. And fucking, if you get caught and you go to jail, that's just what you do. And the destabilization of the family unit that came along with that seems to be 100% intentional.
Oh, absolutely. If you watch the NWA movie biopic they made recently about NWA, Paul Giamatti played the producer Jerry
Yeah.
Heller.
Yeah.
And take a look into Jerry Heller and his ilk and who those people were, who they were, what interests and masters were they serving.
So I
And
watched that with one of my kids, and there was a point where my kid looked at me and he goes, "Dad, what's a pager?" And I was like,
oh my God, yeah. So yeah, it's true. So Jerry Heller played a role in the emergence of West Coast rap music when he managed Ruthless Records with Eazy-E, and discovered, signed, or managed the likes of NWA, Black Eyed Peas, Above the Law, Bone Thugs and Harmony, Dr. Dre. Straight,
the original mumble rappers.
right, straight out of Compton. So that scene. So if you peel back a couple layers, and Adam Green does a brilliant job, and No More News, of research, peeling back layers of people like Heller and other record executives or people who were in the rap game. And it's all there, man. Destabilizing the family, glorifying the thug life, the use of drugs, being the way they were towards women, maligning women, treating women like dirt. The whole culture. I mean, that was essentially poisoning a community. It poisoned the community out there. And
at the same time, you saw the complete distancing of the musical industry from more conscious hip hop artists. And you're never going to find like The Last Emperor being played on a Clear Channel studio.
or like Immortal Technique or KRS-One.
Yeah, there's no Immortal Tech. R.A. the Rugged Man, like he just put out a new album and it's got some fucking just incredible people on it. But you're not gonna find that being pushed because the shit that they're talking about. Let's take Dead Prez, for example, because I think they were particularly clairvoyant. Dead Prez and the Coup probably had it as right as anyone could possibly have it in that moment, and trying to put out a record and trying to talk to people about it. And they just got fucking shunned. Completely fucked over, not only by the record company but by their fans. The propaganda that was put out against M1 specifically was horrendous, and it made their fan base turn on him. KRS-One, his fan base turned on him when he went to go and try to do a show at the WB. Because he had given up on fucking hip hop there for a while and was like, I can't. Like they're telling me to put out an album that isn't me.
Right. Well, it's the game. I mean, the money game, and you have to toe a line, you can't break the mold, and sometimes these big stars, their wiring comes loose. Like Kanye. Kanye is a weird. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Kanye. I mean, you hear him at some of these concerts, like in these outbursts, screaming about stuff and how
He talks about sacrificing his mother to the industry.
Yeah.
And the way that he presents it is, my mom was the price that I had to pay for fame.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm fully aware that like the cheese slid all the way off his cracker, but whether that's a natural reaction to realizing what has been done to him and what he's done to other people, or if he just got so fucking rich that he had a lot of free time to do his own research. I don't know, man. I don't know. I think that his relationship with Trump is particularly interesting. And I think the fact that like he goes to church now and basically has like 70 or 7,000 people going to church where he's at to hear him talk about some shit is fascinating. But I'm more interested in, I would love to see him come out and do like an expose on the industry. I would go see that.
Yeah, I mean, I know who knows how deep he would have been allowed to go, but I know Joe Rogan was trying for a while to have Kanye on and talk about all the shit when, it exploded when Kanye went to the White House wearing a MAGA hat, standing next to Trump at the fucking Oval Office, which is like, that's a surreal scene in of itself. And going against this narrative that, all African Americans have to hate Trump and they have to be liberals. They're, belong to the Democratic Party, all that kind of shit. So it is.
Yeah, the thing is, man, I don't think if you're gonna put the way that my friends put it when they talk about staying inside the Democratic Party is you're on the plantation.
Yeah.
And you need to get off the plantation. I don't think you can get off the plantation by going to a nicer, better funded plantation.
Good point. Good
You
point.
know, I mean,
Yeah, you look at people like Terrence Williams and Diamond and Silk and Candace Owens and Kanye West. They're all on that side of the fence, and they serve an agenda and they serve a purpose for sure.
dude, nobody, no matter what color of their skin, nobody making the kind of money that like I make thinks that going to war with Iran is a necessary step.
Right.
And that's what they're pushing. They're pushing, regardless of whose name you want to put on it, they're pushing John Bolton's fucking fantasies.
Yeah, they're pushing PNAC's agenda, neocon.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And like that's not getting off the plantation. It's not. It's moving to a different one with possibly a more comfortable chair.
More comfortable, yeah, but still, nonetheless, if not more, genocidal.
Absolutely, PNAC. Those guys. When you look through the major events that have taken place in the U.S. since the turn of the century, PNAC is all over them. And Richard Pearl specifically is all over them, and he crops up in a lot of these pandemic simulation scenarios. Him and what was her name? Tara O'Toole. She was one of the doctors. But Richard Pearl and Tara O'Toole go hand in hand together back to the anthrax scare that happened right after 9/11, all the way through being two of the presenters at Crimson Contagion, and Tara O'Toole being one of the presenters at Event 201. And you can't ignore threads like that. You can't. I mean, if you're any kind of conscious, you can't ignore threads like that.
Yeah, it's true. It's really a small group of people. It's not when time and time again, when names like Richard Pearl or Douglas Feith or Jerome Hauer, turn up in this stuff, you have to say to yourself, well, yeah, this is a group of people and this is what they do. They've always been into this stuff and they're going to keep doing it and we're going to keep falling for it, you know?
Yeah, and well, I mean, that's why it's why there's shows like this. It's why there's that's why you guys are doing your thing. That's why Tripoli's got the 17 different things that he's doing right now. And I mean, there's a lot of people that are doing the work and doing the research, but we all kind of sort of hang out in the same bubble, like I don't believe that people can necessarily like get out of the bubbles that they've put themselves in unless they're fully aware of that. The problem is trying to take people who are in the truth community and setting them down in Sunday brunch with Rachel Maddow. Like, as much as we want that, that's never gonna fucking happen.
Yeah, well, if someone by some way gets through their filters and gets onto one of those shows and says anything even remotely that deviates from the propaganda and the script, you're blacklisted. You won't be invited back on, and you're just called a conspiracy theorist and crazy and insane. So, really, what we're doing is we're creating our own media, man. And this virus thing is laying bare like the legacy media. We don't need those fucking people. They're a bunch of
terrible.
Yeah, they're a bunch of assholes. They're a bunch of groveling, on the take corporate mouthpieces. And I mean, I don't know if you heard Whitney Webb talking about Maria Farmer. Maria Farmer, who did a 3-hour interview with Whitney Webb, and she played some excerpts of her phone call with her permission. She talked about a reporter who, in '96 or in the '90s or whenever it was, she went to this reporter with all the information about Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and being trafficked and the network and Les Wexner. And she said she would protect her and she would be okay and that you're going to be safe with me. What does this bitch do? She turns around and goes and has drinks with Ghislaine Maxwell and tells her that Maria Farmer is the one who reported her to the fucking FBI. Yep. I'm trying to find her name. I'm looking for her name. Maybe you remember it. Let me look.
No, I don't remember the reply. I tried to listen to all of that interview yesterday, and I just fucking ran out of time.
Yeah, I'm looking right now on Whitney Webb's Twitter. I'll find it. It'll just take a sec, but that's just one example, of the fuckery.
That's not what's her name, like Judy Brown from Miami Herald.
No. She was good. She did real. This was Vicky Ward. That was the journalist's name. Vicky Ward turned around, betrayed Maria Farmer's trust, and went straight to Ghislaine Maxwell and told her that Maria Farmer is talking to the FBI about you and Jeffrey Epstein and Les Wexner. And we just need to keep saying these people's names. We need to keep talking about it. We need to not shut up about it. We need to tell people about it and just keep putting it out there. I mean, I don't know if justice can ever happen, if Ghislaine Maxwell will ever see the inside of a prison cell. But, we got their number, man, and we're not afraid to speak up about it.
Hell no. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap. Eric, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm sorry about the multiple Kevining of our stream.
Hey, Kevin has a job to do. He's got a family he's got to feed. So if he has to interrupt our live stream, that's okay. We'll keep coming back. Okay, we're not going anywhere. But yeah, man, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed talking to you. And
will you please tell the folks where they can find your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Instagram as Senator Jackman's my handle on there. Twitter, it's Jackman Radio. And then my comedy website for all things Donald Trump, my Donald Trump impersonation. If you want to hire me to call your in-laws and tell them how ugly and fat and horrible they are, I'll do that for you. We'll negotiate a great price. My website is jackmantrump.com. And then I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/JackmanRadio. YouTube channels, Jackman Radio, same with Facebook. And, shoot me a message if you want to collaborate, if you think there's something interesting I should see or know about. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Kick ass. Well, that's gonna do it for this episode of Slow News Day. I will be back in a little while on Rockfin with Nico House. We're gonna chop it up a little bit. That is always fun. Slow News Day is on Rockfin now, by the way. And if you go to the Rockfin, you sign up for an account, you can watch a ton of content for free. If you decide to endorse me for $10 a month, then you get access to all of my premium content as well as the premium content of a number of other people, including Jason Burmis and Nico and Ron Placone. A couple other folks. Convo Couch, that's right. So it's like going to Patreon, but you get 4 or 5 creators for that $10. So if you're so inclined, please do that. I hate to have to talk to people about this shit, and I usually forget about it on purpose, but that's, it is what it is. I'm Steve Boykinen. Thanks for hanging out. Good luck to us all.